stay interested, and it's always good to see other people's experience. And because everybody's different, every client's different, every rider's different. It's just kind of neat to get the perspective in terms of what's going on out there in the world.
Dude, 100%. I think that that's actually a great way to open this thing up, because there's, I'll even ask like Patrick something, and sometimes we want to hear a cookie cutter answer back, because like we want to like simplify what we're doing. It's like, this is the thing to do, right? He's like, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the this? What's the that? What's the background? What have you been doing? Da, da, da. And I'm like, damn it, just tell me what I want to hear. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us want. We want him just, not for being lazy, but we have an idea of like where we should be going with training. And it's like, just validate me. And that's kind of what my first coach said one time. He was like, a lot of athletes that just buy a template, not to knock it, but it's like, they just want something that says like, this is okay to go do it. And you'll feel good. You'll have more confidence in your plan. But one thing that actually sparks a question that I had, a guy had emailed me, and he was trying, you could see like the wheels turning of how he was trying to set up his plan and what he wanted to do. And he it was like everything in an email, like, okay, I need to address Zwift racing. I'm going to start doing 3-minute efforts, which I didn't know how to incorporate it, but I've been also doing 30-30s, and I know I need to have some anaerobic capacity, and like literally listed everything about cycling. And I was just like, this is interesting. Like, where do you go? So I think a good first question is like, what does everybody, there's not a wrong answer. What does everybody like start thinking of when they're trying to approach, like, what should I train? Like, if you think about, maybe it goes back to, think of a non-COVID year, like the season ends, you have your like last, let's say, road race. And then it's like, okay, next year I want to improve on X, Y, and Z. But you have like the off season, you have, then like the early season races. And I don't know, I think it's interesting. Like, how do we, and I was actually asking myself that today, like, how do I decide what I want to do next year? How do people kind of like think about that? It's a huge question. So, I mean, it could go any myriad of ways, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's important that, you distinguish between, individualized training. Individualized training can still be simplistic. It doesn't have to be exotic and, fancy, and every workout's different. So just because you have some specificity to an individual's needs and their goals and where they're at and what they need to train, that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be, I'm using the word exotic, but you know what I'm saying. It can still be basic and fundamental. That doesn't have to be lost in there.
Yeah, I think that's good, because a lot of stuff out there is like super complicated. I've ridden with people where I'm like, how do you even remember what to do? They're like, well, that's why I have it written down, like this paragraph sheet of all these, like, they look like codes to a video game. I'm like, damn, I couldn't do that. But what else do you guys think?
Well, hey, Brendan, I was going to say, just on that regard of like keeping notes of like things to train on, if you keep good notes, like in Training Peaks, about how races went or how workouts went, and I think it's a good time to reflect on those at the end of the season, and it's a good way to see what you need to work on.
Very true. Yeah. I'm glad Patrick actually got me to switch to Training Peaks, because I was coached through like emailing files in, uploading them. There was really no note taking. And then it was really hard. Like we always say, it's like see the forest. It was so hard for me to zoom back out and be like, okay, how did everything really play out last year? And like, then I got into Training Peaks, and when I first started using, I wasn't making titles for all of my rides, which is like, obviously a huge help if you're trying to look back historically, like what was I doing that March before I was flying in April? That's a really good point.
I think it's really interesting, talking about the old school calendar. When I started training, it was the same deal. Like I would monthly, I would send my first major coach, Jason Hillmeyer, Brendan and I had the same like first major coach, and monthly I'd send him an email like, this workout, I think I did this right, or blah blah blah. But it was all through an email. There was no Training Peaks uploading. There was no, even the metrics being used. The training plan back then was so simplistic, because like just the analytics were so much less than they were even 2 years ago. The analytics are way different now than they were then. But 10 years ago, it was okay. How do you train progressively? Well, I have to add 2 minutes, or maybe I can add per interval, or maybe I can add one interval and do shorter intervals, or maybe I can do slightly, I've done these style intervals for 6 weeks. Now I'm going to move on to slightly harder intervals. And like, that's really the only way you could logically approach progression or periodization, was just by durations and like plus or minus intensity a little bit. Whereas now, we can plug a rider's info into WKO5 and look at it in all these different windows of time, and you can track trends, and you can model VO2 max and how that interplays with a rider's anaerobic capacity or Pmax, and all these things are interconnected, and the ability to understand a rider is just so much greater. Periodization, for me, I think now is looking significantly different, from athlete to athlete, because we have a better understanding of athlete to athlete. So yeah, there was one question that came in over YouTube. This probably a decent transition from that. Was why do high FRC riders tend to have short TTE? Has anybody else ever seen that before? I think I pointed that out, or I made that claim. And I guess to answer that question, it's not that.
Explain those terms real quick.
Okay, so yeah, your FRC would be your anaerobic capacity. It's a modeled quantity of work that you can do above your functional threshold power. Depending on how hard you're going to use up that potential quantity of work above your aerobic capacity. And when it's gone, it's gone. But it's the size of the battery is FRC. And TTE is time to exhaustion at threshold. So, a very highly developed road rider would have a longer TTE. Maybe that would be more of a focus to a crit rider who could have shorter TTE. And basically, my I guess you would call it an assumption, or the parallel I draw between a short TTE and a high FRC is, first of all, to have a high FRC, that you have to train. So you're not saying like, well, a naturally anaerobic person just is going to have a short threshold. Like you've trained in a certain way that you have now, relative to your threshold, like a larger or smaller quantity of anaerobic capacity. And when you compare that to somebody with a long TTE, I very infrequently have ever seen somebody with a very long TTE also have a high FRC. So I would say, well, okay,
good question. What do you consider a long TTE?
A low TTE, 30. Long TTE, beyond an hour.
Okay.
Between 55 and an hour and 6. Like somebody who can really hold that percentage of or really hold 100%, or if you want to think about it differently, somebody who can really hold a high percentage of their VO2 max for that max time.
Gotcha.
But the assumption I guess I'm making is that, like somebody who's got, and there's another chart in WKO5 that illustrates this really well, whereas like regardless of what duration you're going, you're going to have some anaerobic contribution, and shorter TTE riders generally will have like a really high 20-minute, a 25-minute, 30-minute, and then there's that really big drop off, and that's either a result of a good quantity of anaerobic training, or maybe not the right quantity of anaerobic training versus the right quantity and the right intensity of aerobic training. Does that sort of answer that?
I think it's also, interesting for somebody to like, how would somebody apply that to their training? It's kind of getting in the weeds of, somebody had said, hey, I just put out a 30-second and a minute effort, my FRC went up, but now my FTP went down. And it's like, well, and that's exactly like turning the dials, right? Those are all, that and the time to exhaustion come into play together. They're all working in a piece. So Patrick, what do you think is a good way? Like, what's a pearl that somebody could take out from seeing, hey, I've got a high FRC. What's the like implications of them having a short TTE to their racing? Let's say if they're a road racer, they're doing road race and gravel, and that's like their big thing. Or even the flip side of the equation, someone that has a low FRC, which is more common, and maybe a longer TTE. What would you do? How would they look at that towards their training, do you think?
So I think people who tend to naturally train, I kind of feel like I fell into this category. I do my base, and then I come on a base, and I would like measure my FRC, and it'd be high, which would be like really confusing to me. But so somebody coming from a high FRC, if they're racing, basically, let's say they're racing at the limit of their category, like they're barely a Cat 1, and they can hang on for like they can hang on for like a 90-minute race or a 2-hour race, but once the race goes out 2.5 hours, 3 hours, they're struggling more in the race, because as the longer you go into the deeper you go into a long event, the more fatigue your body's going to accumulate. And you might be able to, if you have enough aerobic capacity and you're getting to the end of your event and you have a high FRC, you're probably going to win. But if you're below your category in terms of aerobic capacity, you're going to struggle to get to the end of that race with a shorter TTE or a lower FTP. That might not be true. You might just have enough, a high enough VO2 max that, you can get by with your 35-minute TTE, because your 35-minute FTP is 450 or something insane, right? Like, you don't really need to have a really strong TTE because your engine is so big anyway. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody with so like if you're trying to be a gravel racer, you're trying to be good after 5 hours, and you're an anaerobically driven athlete, somebody with a short TTE and a high FRC, you're probably not going to make it to the end of that race. You're going to want to do things in your training to bring that down so you have more sustainability for a long event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually what Tom wants to do with me for some races. Like, the FRC that I have, I don't use because it's not good enough to win like a big race. Whereas I need to like bring a little bit of that down and make it a little bit more FTP based, because that's how if I'm going to win a race like that, like that's more up my alley. It's interesting though, like more of the conversations from like big name people are about like more of everything is not better, because it's not possible. It's like you have to lessen some stuff to make more of what you actually need. So it kind of goes back to the first thing of like, how are you going to train so you can win? And that's tough, because that's like chicken versus the egg. Like, how do you know how you're going to train to help you win if you've never won yet? If you're a Cat 4 and you're like, I'm still trying to figure this all out. It's like, well, that's why variety is so great. Like, some people are like, I'm a sprinter. Like, dude, you've been racing, you've done 5 races. You have no idea what you are. Like, you might be a really good time trialist. You just haven't like matured yet.
Here's a case study, exactly what you're talking about. I've got a Cat 4 guy and he's got a Pmax almost at 1500. And so he's got a 300 watt FTP, and I've been working his time TTE out. It's up to a little over an hour now. And I'm thinking this guy can never lose a Cat 4 race, because he's always going to be there at the end and he's going to kill people in the sprint. So, we can work on we could have improved his FTP a little bit, but instead I thought it was, if he's going to win races, we just need to extend that out a little bit and he'll never get dropped and he'll win every sprint. So now when he goes up cat 3, cat 2, you know, maybe you got to change it. But I mean, that's been my approach, at least in getting him ready for this year. I just feel like with the TTE over an hour and a 1500 Pmax in cat 4, it's probably unbeatable.
So that's a question I have as far as like training in regards to like TTE and like in like the optimized intervals like in WKO. It's like that's like the extensive aerobics. Should you like, so being like a gravel racer solely, should like that be a focus of like extending that extensive aerobic interval out until it's like an hour? Like, you know, if it's like, if you have like a 40-minute TTE, should you like progressively try to work on like dragging that out, like by doing, you know, 45 minutes, 55 minutes and like testing that to see like how long can I, you know, I have this extensive aerobic like zone. Should I try to smash that zone until I like fall off my bike and like find out what that TTE like really is and drag it out and base it off that? Or like, that's like the TTE thing is always weird to me as like a training metric, like to use it as like a tool to build upon, I guess.
With, I think, especially if you're thinking in terms of training your TTE out, a good place to start would be, you know, if you have a 45-minute TTE, like, okay, I want to do 102% of that TTE, and that'll be extensive FTP work. And, you know, and you repeatedly do that kind of methodically. But, you know, like Craig was saying, like, then you gotta say like, okay, cool. Well, if my FTP is 300, is that enough? You know, if the race I'm trying to do is it going to be 300 watts for 3 hours? Because then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's not, I need to be going more intensively just by the nature of the level of output. So, I mean, and probably the best way to do it is, you know, a little of both. Like, you know, thinking extensively all the time is really important for gravel, but you also have to make sure that like whatever watts you have are going to be enough, you know, to survive.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
James, I think of you actually a lot when we were talking about 4x10 intervals. And I think that it's interesting that the intensive aerobic, you know, somebody correct me on this, because the shortest I've seen in a while is like 15 minutes. Does anybody know what the shortest intensive aerobic interval is? Because like the 10 to 15-minute interval is kind of lost in WKO from where I see it. And a lot of times I take the intensive and just cut it in half, but even more so, like just look at the PD curve. If people aren't using WKO, basically it's just a model of what you've done versus like what the algorithm thinks you could do. And it's a good way that you can like kind of, you don't want to chase after like little holes in this chart. But James, I think that I've gone after increasing TTE, and the one thing that the pitfall that I've fallen into is like any other like soul-minded metric that you're chasing. I'm like just chasing this. Like I'm not, why I'm, you know, I got too obsessed with it almost. Then I kind of am like, sometimes I don't feel like I'm going hard enough because all my efforts are going in these really long, like hour efforts. And when I think of gravel, kind of what we were talking about a year and a half ago, of like nobody was saying like you got to go do VO2 max. I thought it was just gonna be like a long 6-hour race. Like these things start the first, you know, the beginning might be insanity, or the insanity is at like hour 3.5. So I'm torn on that. I think it's a really interesting question. Has anybody else had experience like their own like training because of TTE, like doing specific things because of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's like for gravel, it almost seems like TTE and like VO2, like that's like those to me, like they're the two numbers like that kind of make sense. Like at least the way that I would race gravel, like because I look at like the extensive aerobic is almost like tempo-ish kind of, at least kind of like for me, which like that's where the race is like 90% of the time. But then it's like then you skip the other zones and it's like straight to like VO2, right? It's like there's not like a lot of middle ground there. It's either like zone 2, zone 3, or like boom, going super hard, right?
Mm.
And then having to come back down to that. So it's just interesting. Like I'm just like geeking out on like the WKO stuff with like TTE. I just like try to like wrap my brain around like how it fits in.
Who else is doing gravel stuff, and what have you found has helped you in your training? Nobody's doing gravel. Actually, is everybody here a roadie? Now I'm looking around. I'm like, there are a lot of road people.
Yeah, for the most part. Dabbling in some mountain bike this season, which is new, but that's not that different from doing like some cyclocross racing. You know, maybe just a little bit longer, but yeah, mainly road.
Yeah, that's
I have
right.
an off-topic question.
I'm mostly cyclocross.
I am mostly road and trying to figure out where I could go next. I guess I'm kind of the cat for rider that you described. Like I haven't been doing it for that long, but I wish I had been. And had high hopes for 2020, but obviously it did not pan out. So
what do you think is what attracts you? I think that should be where you go. Like what excites you?
sure. The more that I think about it, it's like kind of between cross and time trials. Like I had a 20-minute FTP test a few weeks ago, and I got a pretty good watts per kilo going. But I've never done any kind of cyclocross races. I watch them every weekend, and I'm pretty comfortable with clip-on TT bars and everything, but haven't been in an actual time trial before.
Dude, that's awesome. I think that God, this is like killing me that you're falling in love with cycling when there's no events going on. Because I think back to like my first year of racing, it was just like crack. It's like every weekend you're like, where am I going? Where's the next group ride? I gotta like just go really hard. But I think, that's cool that you like two different disciplines, because you could road race and time trial during the road season. And then as cross comes along, like, start to transition, and you'll see like you're the guy that I start to not like, because you take my roadie friends and you guys all start riding cross bikes, and I'm like, where'd everybody go? Oh, they're hopping barriers and drinking Belgian beer, and like, damn it.
Yeah.
So I think you're in a good place, actually. No, I don't mean to say that it's bad to have a lot of different avenues in cycling. Like, that'll definitely keep it fresh. I think the only thing you want to be careful of is just trying to race everything all at once, and like never get off the bike and do something different. Where do you live? What city or state?
New York City. It is cold and disgusting out
Okay.
here, and everything's wet, and you basically everything is Swift.
Yeah, which isn't bad.
No.
But as long as a new person, as long as you give yourself some time to, you can still, it's heavy, but you could go time trials to cross to Zwift to road. Just like, you look old enough that you can be lifting, get some gym time in there. Do a few different things just so you don't burn out, because that's pretty easy to do. But
Yeah, I'm 32 years old, and my coach is actually here right now, who is Josh down there. And he's been awesome. He's definitely trying to push me to do a lot of weighted workouts. Today was leg day, and I combined that with like abs too. So he's been a huge motivator for me. And actually, one of my other teammates looks to be on this call too, who's Adam. So they've been great the past months here, just to keep that motivation up.
that's awesome, man.
What
Josh,
team are you on?
before.
I'm on Dave Jordan Racing.
I started racing in New York, so I had
Nice.
very fond memories. Good times are in your future.
Oh yeah. Very early races.
So how easy or difficult is it to be, just a strict time trial discipline rider as far as going out and finding those events? How far do you got to travel, that sort of thing, frequency?
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
Arrow everything.
I don't really know exactly where everything is around here. I know that there's a bit of TT racing and cross races, but I'm like in Jersey City, so I'm like kind of the best of both worlds almost, I'd say. But most of the road racing, when it's actually going on, happens in Prospect Park and in Central Park. So those are obviously pretty close by. But
In Colorado, we have like full-on TT series, like all up and down the Front Range, and like a whole weekday series too of like TT races. It's pretty rad. They're all in like state parks with kind of closed roads, so it's pretty awesome. It's something that I've given some thought to. It's like instead of doing like a weeknight crit, you just go out and do like a weeknight, like 30-minute smash yourself TT. Like you don't even need like TT bike. You can do it on any bike you have, and like probably get a pretty good workout out of doing like a 30-minute like TT once a week.
Yeah, anything with a Mercs category, like Mercs or old school, like our style time trials, kind of evens things out a little bit in terms of the equipment choices. I think that's the toughest thing. Like at the lower categories, is you'll have a lot of disparity in terms of what equipment folks have. And I hate to say it, but it's, if you have a time trial bike, just in terms of position, you don't have to necessarily have a disc. You could have a time trial bike just with standard shallow road wheels, but it's still being able to hold that position.
That's
really
funny. I came to like road racing straight out of triathlon. So I had like full on TT rig, disc, 808 front wheel, aero helmet, skin suit. Like I won a bunch of Cat 4 and Cat 5 like stage races, like road races, because I could just win the TT. Because of like I had been doing Ironmans and stuff. So like coming to like road racing, I could just like do it like a 10-mile TT like super hard because I had all the gear. Like I wasn't better than anybody. I was just like I was way more aero. It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of the unfortunate nature of cycling. It's expensive, and then you get into niche parts of it and it gets even more expensive. But I mean, the benefit is like it does give you those different kind of, like every race is a workout in reality. It's practice, all of it's practice, right? So it's like a lot of people are not going to go out outside of doing like a threshold test and just hammer for 30 or 40 minutes. And so sometimes that'll get you to kind of go beyond what you do in training, just because that mental like race aspect of it, everybody gets hyped up. It also gives you a good sense of pacing and just your ability level.
Talking about turning the dials too, I mean, your weekly crit versus your weekly TT, like you just said really astutely, a race is a form of a workout. That's providing stimulus. So if you're giving yourself 2 times a week, 2 times a week, you're doing a really punchy group ride, then you're doing the punchy local crit that really doesn't have anybody that out there keeping it fast and keeping it like a high average power, and you get a more, really variable, high normalized power, low average power. What are you doing? You're training your anaerobic capacity. Like that's going to have an effect on what you're capable of doing in 3-4 weeks. Maybe it is the effect you want, but maybe it's not. That's something, until kind of these more modern training metrics, I never really kind of accounted for in my training. And it's something like I didn't do in 2020. There's no local crit to go like blow the legs out on. Instead, I'm just doing all Zwift, and guess what? My FTP went up. because I'm not doing that anaerobic work. So like that's that balance. So it's good to have options and be aware of what your training is or what your racing is doing to your physiological profile.
So I've got a question. I'm actually glad that there's a couple other coaches and experienced people in here. The idea of artificial intelligence and coaching has come up, and I'm trying to think where this guy was talking to him from. But we were talking about just different. Trainer Road is getting big into saying that they're going to have AI and that it's going to be able to pick a workout better than a human can. And I was talking to Nate about it, their CEO, and he was like, and it was a super friendly conversation. I've reached out to him just more as like a mentor side of like his business and talking about stuff like that. And he made the comment like, he's like, yo, you got to go where the puck's going, right? And I'm like, well, I don't know if AI is where this puck is going. And, I said, WKO is not going to do AI. And he had made the point because, they have coaches around it and with Training Peaks and they don't want to eliminate coaching. And Nate was like, listen, I don't want people to have to pay for a coach. I want them to have the best coaching from the computer, knowing more and picking the workouts. And so then I was like, well, now we're really going down two different paths, because for a guy like Nate to think that coaching is picking the workouts, I'm like, damn, dude, I'll give people a training calendar. It's not going to help them. Like it's like anybody can find an online calendar. What do you guys think? And this goes back to WKO optimized intervals, which I have some issues with. I don't use them very often. Whereas Tim Kusk is like, oh, it's amazing. It gets you 95% there. And I definitely disagree with that. Would you guys use, and this isn't to like pick on Trainer Road, but I'm thinking like, is the puck going there? Like when I think of the process of how this conversation started, how do we first think about training? What are we going to train? Even if you knew your energy system, like rearranging workouts, understanding if the athlete executed the workout, like if it says go do 30 30s and you die in like the second set, like just not only the algorithms that this thing would have to know and how much it would have to learn and how is it going to learn the soft side of like, how do you enter, I stayed up all night, I got fired from my job, or I got in a fight with my partner, I feel like dog crap today. Like there's just so much that goes into our own, eliminate coaching, our own picking of a workout and how we're going to ride that day. Do you guys see AI as something that's even feasible? Like the more and more I think about it, I'm like, this seems more and more not feasible, or maybe I'm just not in tuning up with the technology. And that's my other side of the coin is like, I'm the last guy with the new Garmin. Like I will probably not change power meters until like, something really bad happens than what I use. Even if something new and like better came out, I have to be much better. And I don't know. So maybe I'm like averse to technology. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I just think it's an interesting topic. And when a guy like Nate said that, I'm like, that makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Well, I was talking to somebody about in regards to like the Dylan Johnson video, with the Trainer Road recently.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of the points that we came to at the end of the conversation was that Trainer Road's great, but it might attract a different type of cyclist, maybe someone who's looking for something different than, what a coach can provide. So that could always be, two different, choices someone could make.
That's a good point.
And I think a thing too, like that Trainer Road thing, I read through I love that Dylan Johnson. Like I thought it was spot on. And then I went to their forums afterwards and like just saw the fallout, like is whatever. But it's like those people just like don't want to get on the trainer and just ride easy or do whatever. Like they need like a very structured workout every day. But I think if a computer is telling me to do something, or a person, like the accountability piece is completely missing. I think like if the computer's like, hey, do these 30 30s at this, I could be like, dial that down, nobody cares. Like the computer's gonna get mad at me. But like when you have a coach, the coach is gonna be like, you totally like shit the bed at that workout. Like what's going on? Like unless my I mean, AI is real for sure, but unless it gets to a point to where I'm going to come home and like Training Peaks is going to talk back to me and be like, that was terrible. Like, you need to like step your game up or figure this out. Like, I don't really see, because I don't think the workouts are the valuable part of coaching, right? Like you said, like optimize intervals. If that was the case, you could, for 100 and whatever bucks, buy WKO5, load it in, and it'd be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way the week. This is what you should do every day. Here's your targets, go do it, and you're gonna go win bike races. Like, but that's not the case, right? Because there's like, the numbers are only like the smallest part of like bike racing, right? Like, so I think AI, I think it's cool stuff to look at, but like you also need to like take it with like a bit of a grain of salt and have like maybe an outside opinion on the numbers. That's why this kind of stuff's rad, to like be able to ask people questions like, what do you think about TTE? And like, you're a gravel racer, should you chase that or should you do that? Because it's like, nobody really knows because it's all new. And it's gonna be 20 years before that's a real thing. So, and like with Trainer Road, like he's obviously like a software engineer. So that's like where his mindset coming from. Like I'm an like engineer too in that respect. So like I get where they're all coming from, but it's like, I don't know that bike racing, I don't think, or bike training is like there right now, or not even close. Because everybody's still learning everything. And if you listen to like even your like podcast today, like it was cruise around in zone 2 all the time. We're cool. Do those guys need AI like to tell them how to race? Like, no. Like, that's like ingrained in their brain since they've been riding bikes, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think, you know, I think for like a small portion of folks, you know, that might be what they need and what they're looking for. You know, and I think it's because I've done some stuff where it's like I've paired with some events that were just, you know, non-race type stuff, you know, just rides, people trying to do like a century ride or whatever. And you'll come out with a, you know, a structured plan for them that's pretty affordable, and they just follow the workouts because they're just trying to get through it. You know, and there's a big market for that, the non-competitive folks that are just trying to get in shape, you know, and that can help. With the race side of stuff, I just think there's so much more that you have to look at, you know, and like you'd said, James, it was like the idea that the numbers is only one part of it, right? You know, racing, it's yeah, you've got to have the fitness, but there's so much skill set that goes into some of this stuff as well. You know, where it's like, is the AI going to be able to talk to you about like, you know, when you show up to a race, what do you do? You know, like how do you register for crap? You know, like how do you, you know, like just skills type stuff. Like if you're doing mountain biking, you know, it's like how do you clear obstacles? You know, if you're doing road racing, like how do you corner? You know, like you see riders that on paper or on the numbers look like a monster, and you're like, oh, this, you know, this racer should be winning everything, right? They got that high FTP, they've got that high sprint power, they go out and do a crit, and it's like they're just out the back because they don't know how to ride in a group. They don't know the you know, just the little intangibles that go along with it, you know. And then like you were saying too, it's and this is a part that's become more and more like crazy to look at as far as like data, right? You look at it and you're like, oh, I've got the power numbers, I've got the heart rate numbers, I've got like, you know, all this. I can sit there and I can put in all my diet stuff and look at my calories versus my kilojoules, you know, and all this. And it's like the Whoop thing's becoming big, where you're like looking at your sleep hours and like all this stuff. And it's like, how many numbers, and I get it, computing power is like, you know, getting really good, but you know, it's like there's so many variables you have to look at. And it's you know, for all the folks that I've worked with, you know, and I've worked with anybody from like very beginner athletes to like elite level athletes, and it's like very few of the folks that I've worked with, this is their living, right? Like all they do for a living is ride and race bikes. So it doesn't count in, like you were saying, you know, you had a long day at work, you know, yeah, didn't get great sleep. I've, you know, maybe you're getting enough calories, but like when are you eating those calories? You know, is the timing right compared to the type of workout that you're doing? You know, like if an algorithm tells me I got to go out and do a 3-hour workout and I just go out and do it and I fail, you know, is that because the numbers, like my power profile that went into the algorithm wasn't correct? Or was it that like I didn't feed during that, maybe I'm not taking in calories to get through that 3-hour workout or whatever it may be. So I think, like I said, I think for some folks that it's definitely going to be a thing, and I definitely see that like growing, but I don't think everybody fits into that one box, and that's going to work for them. And then, the accountability thing, I mean, how many coaches have a coach? It's not because you don't know what you're doing. It's sometimes you just need that person like looking over things and staying on top of you.
Dude, you dropped so many good points in there, and I am freaking laughing my ass off because literally James just texted me and goes, yo, dude, are you wearing a Whoop? And you literally go, and I texted him back, yeah, an athlete sent this to me. I'm trying it out. The sleep data is kind of tight. And he goes, and then you literally go, and now people are wearing Whoops and they're all into the sleep data. And I was like, whoa, how did he see that?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. So like
that was amazing.
Like, another video, but yeah, it's funny because it's like, I've seen, like teammates and athletes that have gotten into that and have used it for, there's you have to collect the data for a while before it really even knows what's going on. It's the same thing to do like power profiling. Like if you're brand new, how does the algorithm really?
It doesn't, because I probably have 2 weeks in here and have to look. And so James is like, dude, you probably have max strain every day. And so I had the max strain. And then today it was like, you're recovered, you're ready to go. And I was like, I just did a 27-hour week. I'm not ready to go today at all. This thing is not smart, but I think it needs to do some more learning. But dude, the thing that you said that was awesome was just the demographic is sometimes when athletes start, they're missing workouts and they're kind of skipping around. I'm just like, hey, FYI, you're starting to like work out. You're riding for working out right now, not to become good at racing. Like the plan isn't like a pick your own adventure. Everything has a reason. It kind of builds on itself. We're talking about progression and all the basic stuff. And so I think you're right. For people that are using it just to get in shape or like, couch to 50 or whatever they call those like rides, that type of thing, I think that'll be good. But yeah, interesting. We'll see. I'll be curious to see where it goes. The guy who emailed me, I had messaged him. I'm like, because I used to be in the forum a lot, and I used to like that's actually really when EVOQ started. I was talking to a ton of people on Trainer Road, and I've just kind of run out of time. I like the crew over there. I like the people that use it. It is a little bit different of a mindset sometimes, but they're very friendly. It's not like Reddit where people are like, you suck. And it's like, oh, I'm out of here. But I think the guy had said that Nate's going to have a podcast on Thursday that they're going to talk about it. And so I'll be curious to see what people say. I don't know. I like what they're doing. They're getting people to get on bikes. It's just so many people that I've talked to. They're like, oh, wait. When I'll ask them, like, what's their long ride? They're like, well, Trainer Road goes like an hour and a half. Should I ride longer? I'm like, do you want to ride longer? They're like, yeah, I'd love to ride longer on the weekends. I'm like, what? Go do it. They're like, I'm confused. They're like, well, I don't know. Now they do outdoor workouts, but before they're like, well, Trainer Road doesn't have outdoor workouts. I'm like, yeah, go ride your bike. What are you talking about? So
to the AI thing, and I'm not a coach. I'm just a bike rider.
Yeah.
But part of the reason I have a coach is because I'm really easily bored. And I ask my coach, I'm like, make it fun. Give me games within the ride so that I can stay intellectually engaged, because my body won't do it if my brain's not there.
That's interesting. What would excite you in rides?
Oh gosh. I mean, like, that's what I'm trying to think. So like we did these, there's a hill in town that's got 3 little humps, and my coach switched it to like, yeah, do whatever on the bit, but really push it over the top. And it just made it just slightly different, probably the same amount of workout. I don't even know what is being done, but just like somebody giving me something to do and something to think about, like just think about using your legs this way. So I've got something to do with my brain.
Cool.
Yeah, that's like the intangible thing of a coach, right? Is like can eke that out of you where like some software can't. It could be like, I figure out how this person's like mentality is. Like, this is how I can get them to do a VO2 max workout without thinking they're doing like 3x4 minutes, just like smash it on the climbs, you know, like that's where coaching comes in, right? Like,
Yeah.
Or like, what's the tech crits? The crits in South Denver. I had a
oh
coach.
yeah, the tech center ones, yeah.
Yeah. And he would do stuff like, you can go do that, but what I want you to do is move to the front and then move to the back and then move to the front and then move to the back. The whole race, that's your game. You don't, you just like learn how to work through the pack.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of it is like the psychology of stuff, right? Like every athlete has that kind of different mental landscape. You know, for me, it's like I can go out and just do steady state and I can do the same workout every day and be fine with it. Like, I don't know, I don't get bored with it, or I can sit on the trainer, but you know, it's other folks, it's, you know, they have to have some of that variability, you know, in terms of workout, you know, even if you're just tweaking minor things, you know, and then in the bigger picture, especially like in the racing realm, you know, I found like a lot of times I felt like I was more like a psychologist than I was, you know, I was like half trainer, half psychologist in some sense. You know, you're doing the workout prescription and looking at the data and kind of, you know, moving things around based on what you're seeing. But it's, you know, the number of times that an athlete going into an event or the day of an event, you know, you get that phone call and they're like, oh, I'm just really stressed out. I don't feel like, you know, or, you know, whatever it may be. That's almost half the coaching side of stuff as well. You know, so I don't know if people can get that solely through, you know, kind of a digital platform in some sense.
Well, also just like process goals. Like I feel like if you're on trainer road, like sometimes it can be just black and white. Like you either succeed or you fail. Whereas if you're talking to someone, like there are victories just within training.
That's
Yeah,
huge.
You know, analyze why you failed, right?
You suck.
That's one thing that AI wouldn't be able to pick out is whether or not an athlete needs to have a win or not. Where you know, maybe instead of, you know, they're physiologically should be able to do this workout, but they've, you know, had a bad week and had a couple bad workouts. You know, maybe you got to drop the watts or, you know, the increase the recovery or something to give them that win you're talking about.
That's huge because I remember, Patrick, when you were helping me with a couple, like we were talking about VO2 max stuff, and I was like, this is not possible. And it was even before the tweak, it was you saying, but you know what, so and so and so and so and so and so said the same exact thing, like try it and do it this way. And like before even massaging the interval, it was hearing that like other people are failing this on their first tries also, keep working on it. And it's like, okay, I'm not alone in this. A computer's not gonna be able to tell me that. Similar to what James is saying, like, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I need the person to like, no, dude, you'll get through this. Like, keep going. It's like, okay, I'm gonna keep trying. So we've got about 8 minutes left before we wrap it up. This is an hour went fast. Maybe next time we'll have to make these longer. This was awesome. What's anybody got a last topic or question or dying thing on their mind?
I got a lifting question.
Yes.
So this is actually a conversation that John and I were having today, or the last couple of days rather, like doing lifting, like, you know, 2-3 times a week, but like in the times we're in, we're doing like home gym. So you have like kettlebells and like maybe like a weighted vest or something. So you can't get those max weight, you know, for like that 1 to 5 like rep range. And we came up with ideas for things to do, but I was just curious as to what you guys would recommend in not being able to do the max weight. Like what should you do instead?
That's an easy one. You should, if you have like kettlebells, like so you're doing like goblet squats or whatever, right? Or like front rack, whatever, just slow the motion down, like 5 seconds down and like 2 up. And if like 5 seconds, if you lower like the when you're going down in the squat, like that'll put more, I guarantee you, like if you just do them normal up and down, like you do 10, if you do that, like the load that you'll feel from doing 10 with like 5 seconds down and like 1 second up will be way more, and it will tax you way more than that. That's a simple thing to do if you don't have like the heavy weights. It's just like, so I guess it's the eccentric load, I think. Like, I don't know, like the scientific terms, but like you slow that motion down. Or like you're doing a pull up, same thing, like do the pull up and then like slowly go down, like keep your muscles under tension a lot longer and you'll get a lot more effect out of that. Same you do with every movement, push-ups, pull-ups, goblet squats. The only thing I really wouldn't do it under is like single-legged, like deadlifts or stuff like that, because like then you might like be able to tweak yourself a little bit. But that's just like the simple stuff. I know because I've like done it before and had like other coaches and people tell me to do the same things, like more like weightlifting wise, like not necessarily cyclists, but like that's the way to like maximize like the weights you have.
Ask about weight loss.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, my computer's old
Yep.
and slow.
Yep.
I've Brendan, I've read some of your stuff about, you know, like eating lots in the morning and kind of tapering as you go down, or like eating like a king or whatever. I have my schedule is such that I work out at pretty drastically different times. Like today I was free, so I could go at like 2 p.m. when the weather was nice. But then like last night I had to work out at 9 after my kid went to bed. So trying to lose, and like for me, I'm talking like 30 pounds. Obviously, slow is good. I'd rather be fast in 3 years than, you know, 20 pounds less in a month, you know, or whatever. But trying to manage weight loss consistently while also not being able to follow the same kind of like routine every day, if that makes sense.
I think for my thought on that one is the next. So I was in the same boat of like 35 pounds, and this is when I started cycling, because I remember the exact moment I got out of the shower and I was like, damn, this isn't a good look anymore. Like I've gotten heavier than I want to be. I need to like do something about this. And I put my dad's road bike in my basement, and it had like down tube shifters, and someone's like, you should get a trainer. And I was like, a coach? Like, no, dumbass, you put a bike on this thing and you ride in the basement and don't eat chicken wings every day. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so my biggest thing was like auditing what I was eating. And I still joke about it because I didn't understand the nutrition side. So if you don't like talk more deeply with Patrick about this, he'd be a great person to pick the brain on, because before riding, I was running like 45 minutes a day, and I was sitting at a bar, and I can imagine the bar stool, and I'm eating chicken wings and drinking beer. And I'm like, yo, dude, I don't understand why I'm not losing weight. No, no, no. I'm running 45 minutes after work. No, 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 no. Like, had no idea. I thought that was going to cut it. And so it took me like, you probably, since you're riding, you probably know more than that. And I would say take it to the next level, like really start to think of when you're eating, what you're eating, how does it make you feel? Like, it's work. That's the thing that stinks about it. It's like, you just got to kind of like, I would food journal, maybe not count calories, but just journal on it. Like have a pattern, like what are you eating? What's working? What's not working? For me, I think especially as cyclists too, it's like the culture is go for a 3-hour ride, eat whatever you want. That's really not, the math doesn't work that way. I was going to make a post about that because somebody said to me, you can eat whatever you want. You ride so much. I'm like, dude, I eat so much because I ride so much. Like the difference in a 5-hour ride and a 3-hour ride, when you really add in, like if you're carb loading and eating on the bike and what you cannot eat if you're only riding 3 hours, like the math is not black and white like that. So that's kind of like a really general answer, but that's what helped me, like really sitting down and be like, all right, what am I putting in my mouth? Like what's what's going on here?
Yeah, I guess that was the hard part. I mean, because you guys talk about like fueling, like in my notes for workout yesterday, Patrick was like, make sure you're taking in carbs, obviously. And that's kind of, you know, it's always been what you're supposed to do, but you know, paleo and all that stuff kind of came in, whatever, the last few years. But I guess, I mean, do you just make sure you're fueling the work and then like getting enough calories for recovery and then just like eat less overall all the other times? Or like
Yeah.
That's like something I'd like to hear more of you guys talk about, is like, I've like talked to like a bunch of people about this subject too, is like, and all these like pro cyclists have their own, the guys who do track and stuff, like one guy who's rad is like Alex Wild, like pro mountain biker in like Santa Cruz, like whatever. It's like how they figure out the like base, like macronutrient, like intake of like just being a normal human being, like you're like TTE or whatever you call it. And then the way they fill out their calories for the rest of the day. So like if they do like, 1600 kilojoules or calories in a ride, so they add that back in just carbohydrate, right? So they have their like baseline fat, protein, carbs, and then on top of that, they just add carbohydrate, right? So like, it's something that's new to me because I've like other people I've talked to, like they just have like, they need 2,500 calories a day. They eat that no matter what their workout is or blah, blah, blah. Or like you have your baseline that's say 2,000 and you rode 1,500 kJs. Like, how do you like manipulate all those numbers for weight loss, right? It's all just like this weird thing. It's like not something I like personally like track much or anything, but it's something that's super interesting to me because like a lot of people are in that same boat. Like, how do I like train and fuel the workout and lose weight? And, like there has to be some calorie deficit. Like that's like science, like thermodynamics, right? Like there's like, unless there's a calorie deficit, there's gonna be no weight loss. But like optimizing like bike performance while losing weight is like a tough thing for sure.
So
Like that, maybe that'd go on for like another hour, but it'd be interesting to know how like everybody else goes about all that.
Patrick, you jump in on this one, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, you're really right, James. It's kind of it's complicated, and what makes sense one day won't necessarily be the right thing for the other day. To wrap it up, Aaron, you were talking about how you had to work out late, and then sometimes you're working in the afternoon. So I'd always kind of start like, okay, what does today's workout look like, and where is it in relation to the yesterday's and tomorrow's, and kind of plan what you're eating when around that, because you want to be carbohydrate focused in your meal. That's ideally 4 hours before your hard workout, 3.5, 4 hours. So your blood sugars are normalized, but you're topped off as much as you can, especially because it's hard. If you're doing that at 9 p.m. and then you're supposed to be riding another hard ride first thing in the morning, like you're going to have to carb load like crazy. Like you're going to want to really take in the calories after that workout. But if the next day is Friday and you have a recovery ride, you have to do a recovery ride in the morning. Well, actually, that's a great opportunity to go not so crazy on the carbs and the refuel, and just like let your body gradually refuel itself. And because you'll have that 36 hours before your next hard workout, so you can do your recovery ride in the morning and then have your normal, diet for the next day. But it's tricky. It's a really tricky thing to factor in fueling for workouts. I mean, even carb adapting requires kind of constant attention to what you're eating when you're eating. It's another thing that's been proven is that you can teach yourself to store more glycogen. So that's like a constant. You're always in class for that. Like you don't get to just take a day off. You want to really kind of be a carb focused athlete, but at the same time you have to pick when you're going to have those deficits. So I'm being really strategic about when you're going to maybe keep it lean is probably the best way. And then making sure when you look back on a week, you give yourself credit for those times when you really nailed it, and catch a win and be like, I plan to do it here, 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 and like I stuck to my planning. Cool, and that'll fuel your focus for the following weeks.
Cool.
And I think if you have long rides, and if they are like Patrick's saying, it is followed by a rest day, don't starve yourself, but like come home, eat. I mean, really, and count what you're eating on the bike, because if you went out and did a 3-hour ride, but let's say you're only burning 2,000 calories, and then let's say it was a super hard session, and so you ate 90 grams an hour, that's going to be like almost 1,000 calories. You're only 1,000 calories in a deficit. That's not that much. And that's why so many people, I'll talk to athletes, they're like, I just don't get it. This is what I'm riding. I'm like, what are you eating? They're like, well, come on, I eat whatever I want. I just did a 3-hour ride. I'm like, that's the problem. Like, I mean, even if I go out and do a 5-hour super hard ride, and I'm a big dude, so I'm putting out a lot of kJs, that's a 3,000 calorie deficit. but that's very abnormal. Do you know how fast, if you come home and eat anything you want, I mean, you can burn through 3,000, because we've all been on like a team camp and it's like, I eat a lot, but I'm like, damn, that dude is crushing. I mean, we didn't ride that much. So it's tough, man, but it's definitely work. And I think I would say your action items would be, have you ever food journaled?
No, I've lost a ton in the last year-ish since I started riding again.
Yeah.
And I basically come home, eat a pizza, and like still lose weight just because I was huge, I'm like 6. So, but I haven't really. It's tough with a kid too, but I only have her half the week. So.
Yeah, man, it's like corny as hell to say, but like nothing worthwhile is going to be super easy. But if you just take the 5 minutes and journal, and it sounds dumb, but then and journal it before you eat it, because it's like Oreos, you might not want to write that down, right? It's like, shoot, I'm not going to eat that now. It forces you to really think about it. And my last tip would just be, if you go off the rails, sometimes it'd be like, well, I ate 2 cookies, might as well eat 20. Just learn to like cut it at that.
Just real quick, I know we're over a couple minutes, but I think it was John just posted to the group that MyFitnessPal is a good app to use for journaling. I agree. I've used it in the past. One thing that I kind of a routine that I get on is I'm done eating at 8 and I don't eat till 8 the next morning. So a minimum of 12 hours between meals on almost every day. And then on Mondays, so Sunday I'll ride long and hard on Sunday. Say it's a 4-hour ride on Sunday. I'll fuel post ride. As usual, I'm done eating at 8. But then on Monday, which is a recovery day for me, I don't really eat at all on Monday. I'll go, like today I didn't eat dinner or start eating again until 5 p.m. So it was a 21-hour fast post big ride on Sunday, which I fueled for. And now I'm fueling up Monday night for my big ride on Tuesday. So Monday is kind of that day if I'm gonna cut some calories, watch what I take in. That's the day to do it. Now I don't like giving like advice around food and eating just because it's so individualized and it's a bit of a personal thing, but that's what I do for what it's worth.
I just tried to type, but I actually texted to James on accident. I tried to type to the group, "You're making me feel fat," because you were just like, "I don't eat all day." And I was like, damn it, that was not what I did today. Yo, guys, this was awesome. I will definitely post up about this again. And if people find it valuable, hopefully you got some pearl, or I thought it was really good to connect with people. And just how Adam had said right from when we started, like just to hear different people's perspectives. And even if we don't agree on a way of approaching a problem, it's really good to hear of other solutions out there. So maybe we'll do another one of these. I know there was a couple of people that's in like the EVOQ crew that are in Europe, and they're like, you have to do one in the morning so we can come, because I'm sorry, I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. or whatever time it was. So maybe the next one we'll do it like a different time, but I think this is probably a good time slot for a lot of people, sort of like West Coast and East Coast. But yeah, tell your friends. Thanks for coming. And if anybody has questions for us specifically, it's either Craig, Brendan, or Patrick at EVOQ Bike. And yeah, everyone here is probably contactable through someone else. So if you have a specific question for someone, just hit us up. We'll get you their email. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
See you guys.